How do we right the wrongs of the past? And how do we make sure that our children are not subjected to the same injustices we've suffered? Most importantly, how do we heal as a nation and move forward with a sense of solidarity and justice? Hey folks, I'm Professor Darius. Thank you for watching African Elements. In this hot topic, we look at the California Reparations Taskforce. Reparations, also known as reparative justice, is a way of correcting historic injustices that continue to manifest in present day. The word reparation comes from the Latin word reparare, which means to repair or restore to a former state. In other words, reparations are the restoration of a person or people to a state of wholeness after a systemic act of injustice. Today, the word reparations is often used to describe policies that would compensate Black people for past wrongs. The history of the United States is filled with such historic wrongs. The slave trade, segregation, racial profiling, and a myriad of other systemic injustices, past and present, continue to impact American society today. But how do we measure that impact? The racial wealth gap is one way of measuring the impact of generations of racial injustice. California's racial wealth gap is understudied, but a few studies of Los Angeles show the disparity. One 2016 study found that the median net worth of white Angelino households was $355,000, while native-born Black Angelinos was $4,000. The same study found that the median value of liquid assets for Black households was $200, compared to $110,000 for white households. There are a variety of reasons why this gap exists. For systemic reasons, people of color tend to live in neighborhoods with lower property values, and as a result are more likely to end up with lower net worth than white Americans. Health disparities due to environmental racism and lack of adequate access to quality health care have left Black Americans with excessive medical debt, in addition to shaving off productive years of their lives. Mass incarceration has ravaged Black communities by removing human capital and placing a strain on Black families and communities, leaving them short-handed. So, how do we identify and assess the ongoing impact of systemic injustice? In 2020, California Secretary of State Shirley put forward California Assembly Bill 3121. The bill's passage led to the first of the nation reparations task force in California. Appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom, the 9 members of the task force convened to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. The purpose of the task force is 1. To study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. 2. To recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force's findings. And 3. To recommend appropriate remedies in consideration of the task force's findings. With the help of economic consultants, the task force looked into historical injustices such as redlining. Redlining was a policy of denying loans to Black people, restricting them to specific areas, and thereby devaluing homes in predominantly Black neighborhoods. The 4 economic consultants calculated that each Black Californian who lived in the state between 1933 and 1977 experienced a housing wealth gap of $223,239, or $5,074 for each year in the period. The experts said that the number, which is the difference between the average value of all homes in California and the average value of Black-owned homes, could be considered for reparations. Health disparities are another prevalent issue facing California's Black population. Again, with the help of economic consultants, the task force found that Blacks had the lowest life expectancy of any racial category in the state, and also experienced higher death rates than other racial categories from cancer and infant mortality. Black women are 4 times more likely than white women to die during childbirth. Although there is no actual price tag on a year of life, some economists use a $10 million valuation for a person's entire life. This group of economic consultants calculated that the dollar amount of the gap in life expectancy for Black Californians to be worth $127,226 per year. Mass incarceration is another inequality the task force examined. The consultants looked at the number of black people who were imprisoned for drug offenses since 1971, when President Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs. In the U.S., black Americans are more likely than white Americans to be arrested and convicted for committing the same crime. In particular, the consultants found that black men are disproportionately arrested and convicted for drug crimes compared to white men. In all, the Taskforce interim report notes a series of government actions and compounding harms that have resulted, organized into 12 specific areas of systemic discrimination: enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, housing segregation, separate and unequal education, racism from environment and infrastructure, pathologizing the black family, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life, stolen labor and hindered opportunity, an unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect, and the wealth gap. So how might we go about addressing these systemic injustices? At nearly 500 pages, the California Reparations Taskforce interim report recommends remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans. Recommendations include putting a stop to legalized slavery in California by removing specific language in its state constitution allowing involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. The interim report also suggests holding police accountable for violence by removing immunity laws that protect officers from misconduct. Additionally, the task force seeks to address environmental racism that disproportionately exposes black communities to pollution and poor air quality and urges educational grants to address the black education gap. The task force has yet to suggest cash payments to black Californians. At the federal level, economists have estimated that reparations could cost the federal government around $10 trillion to $12 trillion, or about $800,000 for each eligible black household. But Moore noted that cash reparations aren't out of the question, particularly with the state's estimated $97.5 billion state budget surplus. Task Force Chair Kamala Moore added that California does have the budget to provide reparations in the form of cash payments, and the surplus is even added evidence of the fact that it has the budget. The recommendations come amid growing calls across the nation for reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans. But as we've seen, reparations can mean a lot of different things. Reparations for African Americans must include economic reparations along with addressing systemic injuries in the areas of education and healthcare. To truly right the wrongs of our past may require a complete overhaul of our current system. California has taken the first step by establishing the California Reparations Task Force to look into the ongoing impact of slavery and racial discrimination and proposing solutions. Justice and reconciliation can only proceed by addressing the systematic disadvantages that people of color face. Repairing the damage to our social fabric requires that every citizen have access to an education, healthcare, and a legal system that promotes equal opportunity. I'm Professor Darius, and if you're still watching, consider joining the history makers in our Patreon community who make it possible for me to continue to make this content. As always, thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to become a history maker, you can join them for as little as $1 a month and gain early access to ad-free videos. Or you can support us for free just by leaving a like, dropping a comment below, and subscribing. Either way, thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in the comments.